Great. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining today. So this is our third Impetus webinar. And today, this is part of a double bill, on climate resilience. So the first one's going to focus on citizen science and urban extreme heat. Just to give you a little bit of background about who I am. So I'm Alex Albert, and I'm a senior researcher at the Centre for Collective Intelligence. So we are an organisation that is based in Leicester, in the UK, in London, and we think a lot about different methods to kind of strengthen the relationships between communities and institutions to solve social challenges. Nesta is the UK's social innovation agency, and it's a not-profit organisation focused on positive social impact. And so, yeah, we're a team within Nesta. So today I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction to Impetus, and then we're going to hear from three really interesting citizen science initiatives that all focus on urban extreme heat, but in slightly different ways. And then there will be a chance to ask questions and have a bit of a discussion in the second half. I would say if you have questions as we're going along, it's probably best just to put them in the chat, and then hopefully we can discuss them at the end. So just really quickly, what is Impetus? So Impetus is a 4-year innovation program to support and give recognition to citizen science. Impetus supports citizen science by enabling a wider range of citizen science initiatives to access innovative funding. We have a strong focus on enhancing the contributions of citizen science to the Green Deal and to the UN's SDGs. So we support citizen science initiatives through 3 open calls. The third open call is currently open for another week, I think, but we'll share some more information on that. And we offer 20,000 euros to kickstart 100 new citizen science initiatives and 10,000 euros to sustain 25 citizen science initiatives. So then we've also set up an accelerator that provides an integrated program of support and training and mentoring and resources for the initiatives. We also have the EU Prize for Citizen Science, which is awarded to citizen science initiatives for like outstanding achievements. And then we also have a stream of work around kind of shaping EU policy in and with citizen science through horizon scanning, action research, policy briefs, these webinars, and other workshops with key policy stakeholders. So that's a very quick overview of Impetus. And there's a QR code if you want to find out more, if you aren't familiar with the program. But yeah, just to say this is the third seminar in our series. And the next one is next week, which will be on kind of how to transform water management with citizen science. So you can sign up there as well if you're able to make it. And other topics that we'll be focusing on are inclusion and diversity in citizen science, hopefully later in March, and then citizen science and women's health, and many more topics coming up. So I'm going to hand over to Ma from Heat Watchers in Action, who's going to talk us through a bit more about their project.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alexandra. So if you can, yeah. So thanks first for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here after finishing the Impetus, the first Impetus as kickstarting project. Our project addresses climate injustices regarding the unequal effects of climate change, and taking also into account the differential capacities to adapt to those effects. And in particular, we focus on heat, that is summer thermal discomfort and summer energy poverty, because we focus on heat inside households, inside urban vulnerable households with children. We have two goals. We use citizen science first to understand and disseminate those unequal impacts of heat, but we also use citizen science to co-create and accelerate equitable child-oriented adaptation. So this is one of the big novelties, perhaps, of this project of combining equity, but also child-oriented resilience. So next slide. Our project does depart from previous research. In fact, last week's the metropolis of Barcelona, the case in which we performed the first pilot of heat watchers in action, appeared in last week's as the most heat vulnerable city in Europe, at least regarding mortality by the end of the century. And in fact, our previous research found that 16% of the citizens from the metropolis live in climate vulnerable areas. That means that 50,000 children, 18,000 teenagers, and almost 50 primary schools are located in those vulnerable areas. So this gives us like a key justification for starting this project. What do we do with heat watchers in action? Next slide. Yeah, so we perform 4 different types of activities. The first activity is school workshops, in which we train, we share learnings with students, we train them to be a citizen scientist, and we also co-create potential solutions in the last workshop. Next, yeah. And then during the second and the third workshop, what we invite them is to participate in the monitoring campaign at their own households. And for the reason we share next, thank you. We share with them a kit of heat watchers by which they fill a heat diary. So each child is daily filling this diary with their perception of their thermal perception. But also at the end of the diary, they share also their ideas and current practices to adapt to heat. Also, the parents are filling a household survey. Of course, we are aligned with ethical and responsible research, so they have also to sign and be aware about the research and to sign the consent form. And then for voluntary households, they can also host sensors in order to monitor temperature, humidity, and CO2 in the living room, and then temperature in the children's room and the adults' room. Next slide. Besides those 2 activities, we also have organized multi-stakeholder events to share with other stakeholders the results of this first pilot of heat watchers in action, but also to refine and accelerate the proposals made by children. So I don't know whether you can see it in at the end of the picture. You can see some drawings from children, and we were discussing with different groups on energy poverty and housing, on public space, and also on educational and childhood, the findings of the project, but also the proposals made by children to accelerate them and to put them into action. But also we were discussing the possibilities and challenges of the replicability of the project beyond those 3 schools and beyond the context in which we initiated the project. And for this reason, the 4th activity, the capacity building, was key in order to sustain the project in the future, to train future facilitators and teachers leading this project in the future. And also we organized a webinar for capacity building, and we also shared with them all the materials, for instance, the trainings at the school workshops, but also the Excel files to analyze data, and of course all the reports and on the results. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you very much. So we do not have time to share all the learnings and findings from this first pilot of heat watchers in action, but we wanted to share like a snapshot of the key findings. From one side, as I said, one of the key things here was to analyze better what's happening inside households, and specifically what's happening inside urban vulnerable households with children. We took data from the living room, the children's room, and the adults' room, and we compared this data with what was happening in exterior conditions, no? And one of the things that we found is that there were some differences, of course, some key differences between outdoor temperature and indoor temperature. But also we find the challenge of the school calendar. So for future projects, we would like to go to hottest months, no? Despite the mild weather, some households reach more than 28 degrees as daily maximum temperatures, meaning that thermal discomfort will likely be significant under hot weather conditions. We also, as I said, compared this data with perceptions of thermal comfort. And with all this data, we created these posters for each school in order for them to know what were the data and the key findings that we collected and they co-produced in each of the schools. And next slide. As I said, we also were working on their ideas and the practices that they are currently doing to adapt to heat, because we know what adults are doing, or we are starting to know thanks to research what's the main household adaptations to heat, but we have scanned research, scarce research about children's practices to adapt to heat. First, we found that they use mainly low-cost, accessible, and preserved practices to cope with heat at their households, such as eating ice cream, using domestic or personal fans, drinking more, or making more showers. When we analyzed their ideas, that this is what you can see here, and we found that, again, ice creams were one of the key ideas that they have, free ice creams every Friday, and many different proposals on that. But interestingly, they also had ideas, and so the top 3 ideas included adaptation of public outdoor spaces by using green and blue infrastructure, something very aligned on what we call nature-based solutions for adaptation. As I said, they also co-produced during the last school workshop some big proposals that, according to them, should be prioritized by local governments and other stakeholders. Among them, we shared some of them here, but we also shared the rest with the stakeholders, like, for instance, changes in the public space, changes regarding, for instance, ventilation options for children, for instance, the domestic or personal fans, and also changes regarding water availability, or spaces for fresh watering in their own neighborhoods. As I said, most of them came from vulnerable neighborhoods, and they didn't have access, for instance, to summer vacations, and for them it was key to have those spaces accessible and close to their own houses. And then regarding impact, next slide. As I said, we engaged almost 100 students, but we also engaged families, teachers, and 4-H stakeholders. In total, almost 300 people were engaged in the project. In terms of time, most of the time was dedicated by children, but in terms of participants, as you can see in the graphs, there were also a lot of participants that were adult, and this was one of the keys for also sharing and communicating the results and to implement policy impact activities among those adults that we engaged. And regarding impacts, one more. Yeah, thank you. Besides the citizen scientists we engaged, we produced different data sets that as I said, we will openly publish. We produced several materials to upscale and replicate the project, and we organized more than 20 events across the project. And then specifically about political impacts, I started presenting the project without mentioning who we are, because this is key regarding policy impact. So the project was initiated through a coalition of scientists from 2 different research institutes. Institute Metropoli, we are a research institute conducting research on urban topics, but with a policy-oriented approach, so informing local governments and metropolitan governments through our findings and evidences. And IREC, our research institute, focused on energy topics. And through this collaboration, we also engaged the Metropolitan Government of Barcelona, who was the promoter of this initiative for starting the pilot. And this government had a specific need for knowing what were the indoor conditions inside vulnerable households. So this collaboration is key to transform the research findings into policy action and also into educational action, in this case. So for instance, through the partnership with the Metropolitan Government, we converted the project into a service learning project that now will be offered by the Metropolitan Government of Barcelona through more workshops at the schools and by offering the citizen science methodology of heat watchers in action to all schools and primary and secondary schools from the Metropolitan Government. But we are also, next slide, in conversations with other city councils, but also supralocal governments to replicate and to foster this initiative beyond the metropolitan area. So this is key in order to sustain the project and to make policy or local governments and in this case, but also other public institutions part of this citizen science initiative by being themselves promoters. And then next slide. As I said, through this close collaboration, of course, we also have close collaboration on turning the results into policy action. In particular, we are co-producing with the Metropolitan Government of Barcelona the recommendations from the project towards the current policies at the metropolitan level, such as the climate and energy plan. So how the insights from this citizen science initiative can be integrated and aligned with this metropolitan strategy for climate mitigation, adaptation, and the energy transition. And we are also collaborating with the City Council of Barcelona. In this case, we were invited as experts last week, I think, to inform and to give recommendations about the latest climate plan. And in particular, they are producing a heat plan. So how our findings, specifically working on vulnerable children and from this context can inform this specific climate plan. And then next slide, besides the local government of Barcelona, the other schools were located at other municipalities of Barcelona, and we are also working with the municipal services to share with them the results and to support the transference towards policies. Next slide, with the supralocal agencies. So in particular here, the Youth Agency of the Generalitat de Catalunya, which is a kind of regional government here, and the Office of Climate Change. And next slide, or next, yeah. And we are also collaborating with the National environmental educational agency, so at the Spanish level, to share the insights of heat watchers in action. And also at the EU level, our policy advocacy is focused on climate change adaptation, so on informing climate change adaptation through, for instance, the conferences, the European Climate Change Adaptation Conferences, the collaboration with the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, and with the Coalition for Education for Climate. Perhaps in the debate I can further explain this. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ma. That's great. That's like a whistle-stop tour. So yeah, thank you. So we are next going to hear from Clément from Calor.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Mar, for a really inspiring presentation. We're also in Barcelona, and so my name is Clément. I'm co-founder of Aki, Barcelona. We're a nonprofit workers co-op. And together with my co-founder, Lea Carras, who's also here, and she'll take over the mic in a minute. So for those of you who are not familiar with the context of Barcelona, as you can see on this map on the right, is an incredibly dense city, but also with very little green within the city limits. And obviously, as it's located in the Mediterranean, we suffer from pretty extreme heat waves in the summer, which are compounded by our urban heat island effect, our very dense built environment. And unlike the heat watchers in action who focused on indoor heat, we focused more on heat in public space and how that affects people's quality of life. Next, please. So the objective here, I mean, understanding that heat and urban heat in particular is kind of a wicked problem. No, you can't put an easy fix on it, but rather it needs these long-term sort of structural policy and planning changes to tackle it. Really, the main objective of our project was to better understand this phenomenon and contribute to building widespread awareness of this issue and momentum also behind these important policy changes that are required. So we teamed up with a group of citizens. Here we engaged only adults, but from very different backgrounds, age groups, origins. It was really nice to have a mix of practitioners who were more kind of already working in this urban space, architects, urbanists, folks that worked at the municipality, for example, but also other backgrounds. We had teachers, we have students, also retired people. So it provided a really interesting mix. And the first phase of the project consisted, we did it in the midst of summer, so we were lucky to have some conditions that were quite well, helped a lot with the results that we got. It was pretty brutal back in 2023 that summer. So the first phase consisted in data collection and analysis. So we went out in public space with these thermal cameras to understand, next please, Alex, the kind of temperatures you could see on different surfaces. Here you see that garbage containers, for example, reach 73 degrees. Next. And this steel structure that's in a park in Barcelona up to 70 degrees. So it was pretty, speaks to people and really good opportunity for raising awareness. And then it was followed by also, thank you, other workshops at nighttime to understand also the processes of cooling. How does, for example, vegetation help through evapotranspiration with cooling down the city? Actually, the extreme heat in Barcelona has, it's even worse at night, because we had a night, for example, that didn't go below the temperature of 29 degrees, which means even if you open the window, you cannot sleep at night. And it has a lot of implication on people's lived experience. And we also leveraged some citizen social science techniques, like ethnography in public space, observing people's behaviors, doing some semi-structured interviews. We also ran a survey. Next, you can see some of the results here. So these are the temperatures we saw with vegetation, and try to understand the role that vegetation could have. Next. And then, seized also this opportunity to share some very simple science to better understand, how these mechanisms function. And it worked really well with, these very diverse profiles that participated. Next, please. Next. And again, sorry, we have a lot of slides, but I'll try to run through them quite quickly so we have space for questions and interaction. This was just to illustrate the concept of albedo, for example, some of the educational materials that we produced. And this was the second phase of the project, where, after realizing all these different workshops in public space, the idea was to get out in the street and share these findings with the broader public. So we seized the opportunity we have a parking day in Barcelona. You probably have it also in your respective cities, or we have the Dia Sin Coches, the day where streets are closed to cars. And we seize these opportunities to kind of set up tactical interventions in public space to share the results, share the insights, and really the objective there was to strike up conversations with the general public on these topics, and in a participatory way, in an interactive way, And for us, these were really important because it meant that the kind of understanding that we reached with our participants didn't stay within this small group, but rather could ripple to other groups of society. And then, so these are some of the insights from the surveys we did in public space in these days, to understand how, how heat affects people's quality of life, their sleep, their ability to focus, to work, to relate to each other. Next. And now I'll pass the mic to Leah, who'll tell you more about the third phase, which I guess today's most relevant. It's about how do we build that bridge towards policymaking.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Leah. So in the last phase, we had one series of workshops as well that was more about the policymaking part and bringing together the citizen perspective, but also practitioners' perspective and policymaking perspective to discuss what to do with this knowledge. And we produced some pathways and gained some really interesting insights from there as well. But the most important part of the project that was actually the number 6 that you see here. The fact that throughout the whole process of collecting data, of trying to understand the problem, and we were also focusing on creating bonds between the people that were participating, and this led to this critical mass that they call themselves now Masa Calenta, and it's a group of 12 people from the participation group that now kind of got together with the shared purpose of advancing the outcomes of the project further. And if you go next, here you see how they kind of organizing themselves right now beyond the funding horizon of the project that we did. So basically their goal is to keep raising awareness about the issue that they have found out, create social, cultural, and environmental impact by actually putting things into action, and also concretely helping heat vulnerable people. And in the last month, they have been more focused on team's identity, on their organizational part, and so on. But that has really been the most fruitful, or like a rather fruitful outcome of the project, to make sure that it continues also beyond our intervention itself. Next. So yeah, if you want to have more information here, you please have a look on our website. And to conclude, next, I would also like to share a new project that we're just starting now that really emerged from this challenge that we encountered, and other practitioners with us in the field as well, is to solve this gap between understanding the problem, collecting the data, having like grassroots knowledge, how to then get this knowledge into action and do something about it. And so the POND project is a partnership of open knowledge transfer between Aki, that's our organization, and Umarel, who sits in Paris. And we are seeking to invite policymakers, researchers, citizen scientists, urban practitioners, but and also really citizens to understand the main challenges and barriers of bridging basically citizen science with policymaking and with enacting change in the urban sphere. So the goal is to create a methodology, and that would then lead into a training curriculum that would help other collectives as ours, but also citizen science initiatives to bridge this gap within their actions. If you're interested in getting involved, we would be very keen to meet you and to invite you to contribute. There will be some learning visit, one in Paris, one in Barcelona, and also a festival at the end of the project next year, April, and the festival will be like a learning festival in Paris. Yeah, you're most welcome to write us an email, or also here's the QR code where you could subscribe to the newsletter, and we will inform you with how we could get in touch and what are the possibilities to get involved. That would be very lovely. So yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Leah. That's great. And thanks, Clément, as well. I am going to hand over, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Isabelle. So hopefully you should be able to share now. But yeah, thanks for a great overview.
Thank you, Alex. Well, try to share. It was working before, so. Yeah. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen. Yes.
It's great.
Good. So many thanks, Alex and IMPETUS for inviting us. I'm Isabelle Bonnour, also Giuseppe Verello is here. Today we are from the University of Barcelona. So again, a project in Barcelona. You can see that we are really suffering from heat. And our project is called Heat Chronicles, and it's about how the neighbors' engagement as co-researchers changes the perspective in urban heat research. I will share a video, which is kind of a premiere today. So let's see. Yeah, you will see the different steps of the project and some pictures, some images from Barcelona and neighborhoods. So this is our first step on gates, places. And then we go for beat walks. You can see all ages participants. So with this survey, we both investigate thermal comfort and also thermal sensation in different places. And then, of course, we discuss the results with the participants. And also they can communicate to the neighborhoods the temperatures they measured. Yeah, so I will start the video. So I won't explain much more why we need in Barcelona to investigate extreme heat, but just to say that, for example, in 23, then we reached the highest minimum temperature ever registered, 29.4, meaning that the temperature did not go below this value during all night. And this temperature was measured in this observatory you see on the left. And actually, where do we measure temperatures? So we have only 4 official weather stations, and not only 3 because the zoo station has closed. So you see the observatory Fabra is in the mountain, in the forest. We have another one at close to our faculty, but you see it's also a green zone. And finally, we have the third one in Raval, which is a centric neighborhood, but the station is on a rooftop, so it's not on the street level where we people live. So regarding neighbors, experiences and perception, always I'm showing the work from Mar and colleagues. So we have some data, as she was explaining, that not every neighborhood has the same vulnerability to climate change. So we see that different neighborhoods suffer more from the heat. But with our calculations, we need really to investigate what the neighbors' perceptions and experiences. So the goal of our project Heat Chronicles is to document the heat in outdoor public spaces on a micro scale with the help of the most affected neighbors, and also taking into account my knowledge on the ground as users of the public space. So here you see, for example, an experiment we did with mothers of toddlers, and so we went, of course, to a park in the city. So we started in 23, and then last summer in 24, we worked in 5 neighborhoods in Barcelona and close to Barcelona. We did 52 heat walks, and we had almost 500 participants from all ages, from 9 to 85. And we stopped in 210 public spaces. So the neighbors' participation, basically, we have 4 steps. So in the first steps, we discuss with the neighbor on a map as the places, the public spaces where they want to investigate. Then we do these heat walks where we both measure the temperature, but also the neighbors' thermal comfort and thermal perception. We stop in the places that the neighbors have chosen, and then they vote with their thermal comfort and sensation. And then we come back to them, we analyze together the results, we interpret them together, and they can also communicate with this kind of posters the temperatures to the neighborhood. So this project was done in the frame of the OPUS project, which is an European project, meaning Open Urban Sustainability Hubs, where we worked with Tallinn, Delft, and Vienna. So basically the aim is to investigate how citizen science can contribute to urban sustainability. And now I will give the floor to Josep, who will continue.
Hello. So yes, just to go a little bit deeper on the results, but we want to do that very graphically, just showing you some pictures, and we are going to discuss a little bit about the impact or even the knowledge that we are just gathering from these heat walks. Okay, so as you can see here, we have one very important component, which is these small stations, which are measuring temperature, humidity as well. And they geolocate that through a particular app that is inside this trolley. And the idea here is just to collect while walking the temperature. Okay, and at some points, what we do is just stop on particular locations that are previously identified in a previous phase of the project, and then a little bit go deeper on the individual perception of heat in terms of thermal comfort and also thermal sensation. So this is more or less what is in some fields is called thermal walks. Is quite already, there are several people in several countries already practicing this kind of approach, and I can just show you a little bit the locations in which we stop and also some of the impact. So for instance, in the case of L'Hospitalet, these are all stops that we perform, and as you can see in every color, a small group of individuals, they were around between 6 and 10 for each trolley, and they were just going on exploring several parts of the neighborhood as well. So they were starting more or less at the same point, and then they come back to the same location, which in this case was a public library, for instance, or maybe it could be a public park where we meet together, and from there we just disperse across the neighborhood. So the next slide. And for instance, just to mention some aspects related to policy, or at least to things that can be said in terms of the data. For instance, in terms of primary health centers, the idea is also that generally, or at least in the Spanish context, they generally build new buildings in some areas that are quite empty. And we have to think about these very important places, which is a public facility, in which, for instance, the most vulnerable need to go. Okay, and then generally, and in some of the cases that we have been going through, we found that they are very inaccessible in terms of heat. So they generally, you have to cross an empty part with no shadows, that is terribly hot, terribly warm. And the idea was also to think about accessibility of public facilities in these terms. Okay, so that's one of lines that we are just going through. The next slide. Another place or another set of places are more related on just being in public spaces, okay, and just to sit down and talk and just establish social relationships. So in this case, for instance, there is also some tendency on just using concrete on the basis, and I think that Clement were talking about that, no? That's a very important dimension that needs to be considered. And also, for instance, and also something that Mar was also mentioning, the water, no, the water fonts, no, that are just the drinking fountains that you can get in the middle of the squares. No? So this is something that it's already been identified as a very important and a very relevant aspects that just need to be reconsidered if we want to identify the interesting places in our public spaces. Next slide. Well, this is just one previous picture. As you see, public park or families can meet together and do one of these journeys together, these transects. No? So that's just one group that was just starting or getting ready for start. Okay? And as you can see again, there are shadows to sit down maybe, but not for the youngest, no? That might be playing in the back. No? That there is an issue here that we are not really taking care about these aspects in these public spaces. The next case, the next slide. This is Madai, who is one of our agents in Hospitalet, and is just mediating one particular walk that we did with all groups, all women groups. So what we just do also is to create small groups with very uniform sociodemographic profile. So in a sense that we are able to collect their opinions, but at the same time, individual opinions, but at the same time, just to really orient the discussion on particular groups which might be particularly vulnerable. They can be old people, but also it can be also very young people as well. So the next slide. And this is just another example. No? So if you want to take the metro in Hospitalet, in Torrassa, so you have a big problem because you have to cross this kind of desert, no? That is terrible. No? So it's really, really hot. No? And there is no protection at all. And there is no accessibility in terms of heat. And this is one of the big demands, is that we have to also reconsider our cities in terms of temperature. That's another dimension apart from others that are also very relevant. And finally, Isabel, this is just the public parks as we were talking. They are using metal for doing this kind of very fancy kind of things, but if you just put your ass there, you can get burned. Okay, so that's also some of the things that might happen in this kind of places as well, or there are not many shadows around. This is just a park that it was built next to Canódromo, in which we are in residence in one neighborhood in Barcelona. And in terms of impact, we can just first talk about the basics, which is just raising awareness about this along the neighborhoods. And this also means that it appears in the public media in a local level, like in a city like Hospitalet, which is very large, or in the regional level, we appear in the news just talking about the project, and also just making a space to just, in this case, the very young people in a summer camp in Hospitalet, that they can just raise their voices and just talk about heat in public spaces, and how important is that when you consider the life of this group of people that are generally in the public space for many hours, for instance, in this case. And the last slide is just a documentary that was talking about citizen science, and they were with us in one of these heat walks. They were also able to just express, to have a space for expressing the participants their own perception of heat, which for us, this was our primary goal. And lastly, this is part of the team. So that's a huge effort. We are talking about hundreds of walks in many places that in some of the cases that we're doing simultaneously. So at the same time. So we are talking mobilizing hundreds of people at the same time in a particular location. And this means also to articulate that very wisely with public libraries in this case, but also with students from our own faculties, and also learn and think in scientific terms in a very different way. And also for that, also we had also the collaboration of another European project that we have been building educational materials related to that, related to the protocol. And we are also about to release all the data, which is quite important in terms of the perception of the individuals participating in the project as volunteers, but also the temperatures that we have been also collected in a quite intensive and in a high resolution level. So that's more or less what we were wanting to talk about. We can talk a little bit more about policies, but also more also talking about the current policies in a local level. But if you have more questions, we can just talk further. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Josep and Isabel, for sharing about Heat Chronicles. I realized that we have about 10 minutes for questions, but I cheekily wanted to jump in because I realized that all of you are based in Barcelona and in that area, and there's a lot of kind of citizen activity in Barcelona, but also, as we've heard, like a lot of interest from policy audiences and policymakers there. So I just wondered if there was any kind of reflections on how kind of other locations can replicate this for climate resilience issues. I don't know if anyone has an immediate reaction.
Well, in our case, the idea is that we are going to release all the protocols, and we publish that as a scientific paper, and there are sources and ways of doing that. And as I said, so in terms of thermal walks, that's something is you just Google that. There are also many other cities in Europe, at least, and you can find also publications from US and also from Mexico, from many places that are already trying to combine this perception, individual perception of heat, and the temperatures that you can just collect with local sensors. So I don't know if I'm answering to you that, Alexandra, but
No,
something is nothing complicated. It's something that is already quite public.
so it's about sharing protocols and clear methodologies. Yeah.
Yeah, similarly, we also shared all the documents, and also we are participating in different events to share, and the learnings and the process of the project. So, for instance, 2 weeks ago we are in Valencia, a city close to here, but not that much close in terms of exchanges, for instance, of policies. And we're sharing this experience, and in a couple of months we will be also in Spain. But of course, one of the challenges right now for us is the language, because we produced all the materials in Catalan and some of them in English, for instance, the Heat Diary. But one of the key challenges would be translating them into other languages so that other countries can use them. And regarding uptaking the huge research that is conducted in Barcelona, I also wanted to share with you, I know that it's not exactly the topic, but when you mentioned this, I was thinking on the city officer dedicated to climate change adaptation from Barcelona. And for them, it was also a challenge to follow all current research and to know what kind of learnings they should incorporate inside the policy action. No? So this is also a challenge sometimes to have like many research in the same spot, and of course it would be something to overcome in the future.
On our end, we're really hoping to leverage this oncoming Project Pont to, really start building partnerships with folks in Paris. Our partner Umarel has a great ecosystem there, not just in Paris, but also with the eastern suburbs. So it'll be really interesting also to learn from a different sort of eco-social environment. I think from the 3 presentations we had today, I think it's fair to say that Barcelona has a lot going on with respect to citizen science on heat topics, and a lot of brilliant teams that are tackling this topic. But I think where we're really lagging behind as a city is with respect to implementing solutions. Actually, if you travel to other places in Europe, you see, for example, I was recently in Paris and seeing the political leadership they're showing in terms of depaving a lot of asphalt surfaces and rewilding vegetation within the city. There's so much for us to learn from other places. So I'd like to make sure that the sort of knowledge exchange also goes both ways. And as Barcelona, we have the humility to observe and learn from other places too. Not just in Europe, but also looking south, countries that are maybe exposed to even more extreme heat than we are.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I just wondered if anyone else had any questions that they wanted to ask. Feel free to come off the mic, come off mute, sorry, and ask. Vanessa.
Good morning. Thank you so much for these presentations. I would like to know how easy it was to get citizens involved in these initiatives. I mean, what mechanisms have you used? Because I mean, of course, some of you are in the university, so probably it's easy to reach out to students and convince them to participate. But I see that people, I mean, the time is so precious, right? I'm curious to know how you engage so many people in all these activities.
So from our experience, it's never easy. Go for it.
No. Okay. So in our case, there is an easy answer for Heat Chronicles. We collaborated with 13 institutions, and different in every places. So we worked with schools, primary schools, high schools. We worked with kindergartens. We worked with libraries. We worked with NGOs. We worked with civic centers. And very, very different from each other. So I think we have really to adapt the collaborations depending on the neighborhoods, because in some neighborhoods, for example, we found an NGO which was very active working with young people. In another one, that was a civic center. So yeah, I mean, there is no unique solution. I think you have really to know every place you work with and to get to know the good people and the good institutions. But of course, it's time consuming. It's a lot of work. I don't know, Joseph, if you want to add something.
Well, I would just say something very simple. So always try to do a project that is answering the concerns of the local people. So if you are not reaching that, it's very hard to have the participation and a deep involvement. So that's very important to you first identify that, and in which terms heat is relevant, for instance, in this case.
And to build upon Giuseppe's answer, heat in our context is incredibly relevant to people's lives. And so, we felt a lot of enthusiasm for the folks. We've tried different routes to get to people. As Isabel mentioned, partnering with organizations on the ground is always kind of the most sure shot, because you know that you will get to people that are engaged, that are motivated. We've experimented also with different techniques, more sort of guerrilla marketing, putting posters in public spaces or flyers and so forth, with varying success rates. But it's always fun to try these approaches out. And ultimately, I think for us, it was a bit of a snowball effect, where after the first few workshops, people really reached out to their networks. And so really through word of mouth is how we got most people.
Yes, maybe I can answer from Heat Watchers in Action. We face different challenges in terms of involved people. The first one was to find the schools to participate, and as a Heat Watchers in Action. And well, one of the main reasons is that we start to look at these schools in the middle of the course. Then at this point, it was one of the difficulties. Once we get these schools, then the other challenge is to find or to engage the families to get the sensors and to engage the families answering the surveys. I mean, this is the other challenges. And the other challenge is to involve or to engage the students to answer the heat diary at homes and to get all the information. I mean, we face this issue in different moments of the project. And we try to find solutions and to improve the methodology in order to get more responses. Yes, maybe Mark, I don't know if you want to add something, but I think.
No, that's perfect. No, just I wanted to mention that also it's key to find motivated teachers, no? So motivated
Yes.
teachers, and some of them were really motivated on monitoring indoor conditions inside school. So this is probably one of the next topics to work on.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks to the projects for sharing all the amazing work that you've been doing. I'm sorry the time has gone really quickly, and we're out of time. Yeah. I hope that this is just the start of more conversations. We've got another webinar next week focused on citizen science and water management and policy. So please join us for that. I was just going to ask Chris to share the information about the IMPETUS open call, which closes on the 10th of March.
Sure, yeah. So we have 2 calls going, which gets a little bit of a mouthful, but to explain, but we do have 2 calls going on. We have our call for the EU Prize for Citizen Science, which is looking for outstanding citizen science projects that have had relatively recent updates, I believe in the last 2 to 3 years, if you've had an update on your project and would like to be considered for that, there is an avenue to either receive 60,000 euros as part of our grand prize, but we also have 2 additional prizes, the Diversity and Collaboration Awards and the Digital Community Awards, which both receive 20,000 euros. And also there are 27 honorable mentions along with that. So there's 30 awards all in all. In addition to that, we do have the accelerator call. So, oh yeah, thank you for the dates there. The call for the accelerator is going on until the 13th of March, and we are looking to provide funding and support for new projects, or ongoing projects, which will receive funding depending on your project type. If they're kickstarting, they will receive more than if they're sustaining. And they will also receive mentorship and additional training along with that. This time around, we're looking at 2 main challenges, but they do have sub-challenges. So also circular communities, most specifically resource management, housing and infrastructure, and disaster relief. So that might be related to what we've been talking about today a little bit, or what we will talk about next week. And the second is justice and equity. No, fair and just societies, sorry. And they're looking at public trust, education, and those sort of things. So there is more information on the IMPETUS website, which I have shared, but do also feel free to get in touch if you have any additional questions. And just to answer Cecilia's question, we are recording, so hopefully in the next couple of days, as soon as I can get round to quickly just polishing up the recording, I'll put it online. And thanks, Alex, for organizing.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks to the amazing projects that presented.